Hi, this is Carlin Laborio. Last week I showed you a video how to take a meat student to masters by asking specific questions when you conference and focusing on their glows and their grows. This week, I am showing you a how-to video of how to conference with a does not meet student, or maybe they just barely answered the question, but you want to take them to that next level where they are approaching and at least passing on the ECR. So I'm going to show you glows and grows that I would do for this particular student, how they can focus on answering the question correctly and thoroughly and providing relevant evidence. So let's get into it. This is the prompt that I showed you last time. In the previous video, I showed you how to dissect the prompt. I'm just going to quickly review the prompt, explain how one girl's promise impacts her city and the people who live there. So we talked about using a word, simplifying that word impacts to a more easier to understand vocabulary word like changes. We also talked about focusing on your answering the question about how the girl's promise changed her city and the people who live there. So they have to answer all those parts of the question. So now we're going to look at the student sample. So the student wrote, the girl impacts the city and the people by growing plants while bringing the people together. The text says that there were trees everywhere and the people of the town sat, laughed, and smiled. So, how do you get the student to improve when they've only written two sentences? How do you conference? What questions do you ask? I'm going to show you how to choose 1 to 2 glows. Always start with the positive and pull out what that student did really well. Then you're going to focus on just 1 to 2 grows or areas to focus on. And included in that, I'm going to show you exactly what questions I would ask during the conference to get the student to elaborate and explain and add more. Okay. So, first of all, the glows. I would say to the student, great job using the key words in the prompt and talking about the city and the people. A lot of students might just talk about the city or they might just talk about the people. So the fact that the student used the word impact, I would congratulate them for that. And they talk about the city and the people. I love how you put periods at the end of your sentences and capitals at the beginning. That might be huge for the student that they did that. I love how your evidence backs up the answer. This matches with growing plants and bringing people together. So your evidence talked about trees everywhere and how the people in the town sat, laughed, and smiled. And that matches with what you wrote in your answer about bringing people together and growing plants. So you definitely have some good things going on here. And then now we're going to get into how you can improve your writing, the grows. And so for this particular student, I'm focusing on answering a little bit more thoroughly, answering how, giving more evidence, and explaining. So these are the grows. So the first question I would ask the student during a conference is, when you read this sentence, and I would have the student read it, the girl impacts the city and the people by growing plants while bringing people together. Was it plants that she grew or trees? And then the student would say, hopefully, oh, it was trees, not plants, because what she planted was acorn seeds, which grow into trees. Okay, so it's a little bit different, plants and trees. So you need to be more specific. And how did she grow the plants or the trees? And so I think that they need to explain somewhere about how the promise, which the promise was she got the bag from a stranger, and the lady, she at first tried to steal her bag, and she ended up using that bag and looking inside and finding acorns, and she took that to plant all the acorns, which turned into trees. So they need to say that somewhere that has to do with the promise. So That definitely needs to be explained. What other evidence can you find about how she impacted the city? So they have some evidence here, but they need to go in to the story and they need to find more evidence. Let's see if we can find another one about how she impacted or changed the city. And then while they're doing that, you can be asking the student, what was her promise? Another thing you can ask the student is to explain. So they wrote for their evidence, the text says that there were trees everywhere and the people of the town sat, laughed, and smiled. I would ask the student, explain how the trees made people sit, laugh, and smile. How do trees do that? So they need to elaborate and add more to they need to create a sentence after that, whatever they say off the top of their head. How would trees make, and they might say, well, because since there were all of these trees, that made them want to enjoy the outdoors. It made them want to sit and have a picnic and enjoy the outdoors. And so that's what you need to write what you just said. And then they can start with a sentence starter. I know, or this means, or this shows, and then write what they just said about the picnics and enjoying the outdoors. Then they would need to go back in and find more evidence how she impacted the city, tying it back to what was her promise and how she changed the city and the people. And so getting them to just go back in and add more is going to show a more thorough understanding. They also need to add a conclusion at the end, so they could just restate an answer in a different way using either a synonym or flipping the sentence or adding a transition word like to sum it up or in conclusion. And that would really bump the students' writing up to at least approaches, if not meets. So I hope this video helped you. And if you would like more information, check out my website, carlinlaborio.com, and follow me on Facebook, YouTube, and join my email list. I also have an ECR online course if you want to learn more. Thanks for watching.